Hallelujah, 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 we praise the Lord. We praise the Lord, hallelujah. We praise the Lord, hallelujah. We praise the Lord, hallelujah. We praise the Lord. Let me introduce myself. Rob's already introduced me. I'm Bishop David. I'm the Assistant Bishop of Llandaff. As I've said many times before, that's a mouthful, but just think of the Archbishop of Wales as Lewis. I'm Hathaway. Unfortunately, the series finished a week ago last Tuesday, which has made me very jumpy indeed. There we are. For 25 years, it is 25 years since we first met, but for 25 years, a major part of my work has been working with the disturbed. 95% of those people I met were disturbed by God. 5% were disturbed by God knows what. But a major part of my work is getting alongside those who are disturbed by God and trying to make sense of it, because it's a bewildering thing to be disturbed by God to greater service. And often people, when they're disturbed to greater service, they tend to think in a sort of binary way, that disturbance must be towards priesthood. But I think that's quite a blinkered thing, because if you read the Bible, it's a novel idea to do that now and again, you'll realise that very rarely in the Bible, every book of the Bible is about God disturbing people, but very rarely does he disturb them to be priests. For other calls, people are called to give birth, or called to be king, or called to take on the king, or called to take on the church, or called to speak out against injustice. Time and time again, the Bible's pages are full of people being disturbed by God to do something. The thing about the Emmaus Road and the Emmaus story is that something had disturbed those two disciples big time. They'd gone through Holy Week and Maundy Thursday and the Last Supper and Good Friday. It was sort of Christian faith rolled out into a week, really, and that had massively disturbed them and surprised them. They didn't expect it to turn out like that. They didn't expect Jesus, the love of their lives, to end up getting crucified. So they'd been disturbed massively. And there they were on Easter Day. There was a clue for them. What's going to happen today? There they were on Easter Day and trying to make sense of it all. What did they do? Well, they didn't just sort of stay in their houses thinking, oh gosh, what are we going to do about this? It's terrible, it's terrible. They got out. And I think that's quite a good thing. Don't just sort of sit there brooding over everything. Get out. And not only did they get out, they got out for a walk and also for a meal at the best little pub in all Judea, the Emmaus Arms. And they talk straight to each other. It's two of them, and so they're in conversation. And they're not bottling it up, they're being open and talking to each other about it all. And I think probably fellowship of vocation, okay, it'll be about talking to each other, but sometimes the barriers really do come down when you have a meal together. Sentimu said, John Sentimu was the Archbishop of York, he once said that Jesus did not give us a constitution, he gave us a meal. And as that meal was shared at Emmaus, something clicked and the disciples detected Christ breaking of the bread. When had that happened before? 3 days before, the upper room. And they realised who he was. Something had held them back because they thought he was dead. They'd seen him die a horrible death, so he ain't going to be with them, but he was with them. And the breaking of the bread made them realise that Christ was in the midst. I see all Christians as being detectives, and they're on the lookout for Christ, and we go to church because it's good to, church is a sort of fellowship of vocation really, meet with others. But really church gives us an identikit picture of Christ, and it's a jolly good picture. You've got Christ in the Gospels, and if you read the Gospels, I've been reading the Gospels all my life, but I never tire of doing that because it gives you a marvellous clue as to what Christ is like. And also within church, of course, sharing the meal, breaking the bread, you realise where Christ was present in the upper room at Calvary, And so you've got those clues, and then you go out of church, and your job is to detect him, to look out for him. We're called to be Christ in our community, but we're also called to see Christ in our community. And the second bit is probably the most important work. And Christ trawls a wide sea. We've got that in the Gospels, and we'll come back to that later. But he trawls a wide sea and pops up all over the place. And it's our job to look out for him. And when we find him, let that impact upon us. Do something about it.
Now as they went on their way, he entered a certain village, where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to him and asked,
"Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me."
But the Lord answered her,
"Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better path."
It's interesting in this passage from Luke that the word Luke uses for doing, what does he say? Martha was distracted by her many tasks. "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work?" Both those times, tasks and work, the technical word Luke uses is deaconing. Martha complains that Mary's left her to do all the deaconing. She was distracted by much deaconing, and I think Luke's used that very technical liturgical word deliberately, because sometimes ministry can be so hyperactive that you put people off. And again, it's the fellowship of vocation. People talk. There's an encounter there, and Martha says how she feels, and Jesus says how he feels, and it's a sort of honest meeting which moves people on. The disciples say, "Well, we're going to go fishing." The FOV says we're going to go fishing because we've had enough of all this airy-fairy religious nonsense and want to do something and get on with something. We're good at fishing, it's our trade. And they'd be patient men, because sometimes the fish weren't there, as in this episode. They're even rubbish at their former trade. Also been fishing all night, caught nothing, and it'd be hard work, because they weren't presumably line fishing, it'd be hauling in the nets and chucking out the nets and hauling them in, so it was really hard work. And not a thing to show for it, and so their boat would be riding high on the dawn tide, if Galilee has a dawn tide. And then some stranger on the shore rubs salt into the wound and says, "You haven't even caught a sprat." But Christ calls them to do one more throw, even though they were weary and worked all night and caught nothing. Christ says, "One more throw." And of course there's the miracle, the bumper breakfast, 153 fish. It's a meal again. It's a meal. Thanks be to God. And the fellowship of vocation is a journey. It's on the road, and you're all owning that you're being disturbed by God, and you're trying to make sense of that. And sometimes you'll end up in a place where you didn't expect, or where the original call didn't give you a clue as to where you'd be ending up. And I think that's the most marvellous thing about FOVs. It's a place where people gather who believe in the resurrection and are waiting for the resurrection to dawn.